Good evening. I'm Laurie Johnson. Welcome to Houston Public Media's web series, Political Perspectives. Every week, I'll be joined by show commentators Jay Iyer and Brandon Rottinghouse to discuss all things political. Tonight, we'll continue the conversation from Red, White, and Blue about Commissioner Gene Locke and Precinct 1. So let's get started, Jay and Brandon. First of all, I want to roll it back just a little bit. Let's talk about Harris County commissioners in general. What do the Harris County commissioners do? How much power do they have? What kind of role do they play in our region?
So the Commissioner's Court is done for each county in Texas, and so Harris County is no different, although it's quite a lot bigger, right, than the most. It's made up of 4 commissioners. They have precincts, which they've carved out over the precinct, over the county, head by a county judge who's at Emmett in this case. Their job basically is to spend the county's money and to collect the county's money. So when you're paying taxes, you're paying this to the county, and they use that money. They're also in charge of issuing bonds for the county, so they are getting money that way as well. And then that's what they do to spend the money. Either they're spending the money from the bonds, or they're involved in various improvement projects that can range from animal shelters to transportation issues. So they cover basically all the things that are responsible to the county for the county, separate from the city in some cases, which makes it slightly tense, and so we could talk about how that works. It gets into some odd territory, right, because they are taxing authority, so there are concerns about the property taxes being too high. It also gets into questions about bond debt, where the city and the county is high in terms of bond debt per capita for the state. So it's an issue that gets them into some possible trouble, but effectively their job is to administer the services to the county.
And they are not term limited, which seems to also kind of put a lot of power and control in their hands a lot of times.
Right, absolutely. They get to be in power for as long as the people will send them back. Most of each of the precincts are pretty well, I hate to use the word gerrymandered, but they're certainly packed and have a partisan tinge. At least 4 of them are predominantly, overwhelmingly, in some cases, Republican, with one being a Democrat, rather 3 Republican, 1 Democrat. And so they're there for a very long time. The average county commissioner stays upwards of 20 years, I think is about the number. But the county-city structure is in itself odd because Harris County, if it would, the unincorporated portions of Harris County, if it was a city, it would be the 5th largest city in the country and the 2nd largest in the state. It's massive. And it's a unique aspect of how both in Texas and even nationally. So that politically for them, they have a huge sort of territory that they wield authority over. And there's always been this tension of, is the fundamental job of Commissioner's Court to deal with the unincorporated portions of Harris County, or deal with and try to provide services as part of sort of the greater Houston area and work with the city as well. So that tension is always there.
So one of the first things that it seems like Gene Locke has been doing as he's filling this unexpired term for El Franco Lee is he has been sort of focusing on areas that are within the city limits and doing some more collaboration with the city. We've already seen him reaching out to the city for street improvements, especially around NRG Stadium. We've seen him reaching out for things like debris removal. This is not something that has historically been cozy between the city and the county. They've often had trouble on collaborations, and he seems to be kind of turning that upside down a little bit.
There has been a turning point, I think, in the last couple of years where we've seen more county-city interactions, right? We've seen them partner on libraries, they partner on cemeteries, a pauper cemetery. Most importantly was a bond issue for the Joint Processing Center for inmates. So there has been some recent discussion, but as they mentioned in Red, White, and Blue, there is a tremendous need to have the county money distributed into the city because these are also voters who are voting at the county level. And so the need is really there. Precinct 1 is the smallest precinct geographically, but has the most urban areas. And so they do tend to get a lot of this wear and tear that the other places don't. And so there is, I think, a formula for partnership, but it has been pretty rare. Some of the big issues, as you say, don't always get the kind of attention that they might need. So one is like homelessness, mental health issues, as opposed to the jail is an issue we should talk about too. Things like other kinds of services, mental health services, but also sort of access to healthcare services, things like that are all part of the structure of the city and the county that they should share issues on, and they often don't. So a lot of problems don't get addressed because it's this turf war, like Jay said, or it's an economic issue, which it always afflicts these kinds of problems.
Well, I think a lot of times, does it come down to the city expects the county to pay?
No, I don't think it's so much that. I think it's more a situation where city residents are also county residents, and so there's an expectation that the services that you see out, whether it's deputy patrols that are in the unincorporated area, we don't really see them in the city, or infrastructure dollars that are spent to develop parts of the outer parts of Harris County, none of that's being spent here, right? So roughly about 3/4 of all the taxing revenue is generated within the city of Houston borders, but probably a disproportionate amount of that money is spent outside of the city of Houston. And so that's really where the rub comes in. And to Brandon's point, you've had this historical problem where there has been a lot of tension, but recently, and I think a lot of credit goes to County Judge Emmett. He's really brought a much more collegial atmosphere between the city and the county, and I think that's certainly spilled over. And I think Commissioner Locke certainly is moving in the same direction as far as doing that, and he's also. We shouldn't leave out that he's a political race, and it's the first time, because you just don't have competitive races. You don't have open seats. The 25, 30 years people are in office, so there's less of that going on. This is the first time we've seen that, and so I think that plays a bit of role in it as well.
So that leads into the next thing. When Harris County Judge Ed Emmett appointed Mr. Locke to this role, County Judge Emmett told everyone, well, this will just be a placeholder. I'm not appointing someone who I expect to run. And now Commissioner Locke has said he's going to run. He wants to keep hold on Precinct 1. Was that to be expected?
I think it was a little unexpected, certainly for Ed Emmett, but I think also for like the rest of the people who were considering running. The presumption was this would basically be an open seat, and now it's not really an open seat. So it does create a political dynamic there. For all intents and purposes, he's the incumbent, and the fact that he's been choosing the projects he has, and he's been choosing them where he has, I think does suggest that there is a kind of political motive at play. So this is part of what incumbents do. You protect the seat by using the resources of the seat. It's nothing new, but the fact that he's throwing this into the mix does create this issue, I think, for Senator Ellis, who's been rumored to be part of the mix. There are other members of council who've been talking about this too. We don't add anybody because we don't know exactly who's who, but later in May, they're going to have a candidate forum where they'll basically announce that this is sort of the people who are being considered. But behind the scenes, there's lots of negotiations and lots of favor trading, no doubt, in terms of who's going to get the seat. So politics is always at play here, because we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in funds that are going to be used. So everyone wants to be able to say that they're part of the picture because there's just so much money involved.
And Rodney Ellis, I believe, has actually filed with the Democratic Party for the nomination. We should mention that you worked for him at one time.
I did work for Senator Ellis several years ago, and he is someone I consider a friend. But yeah, he's filed, and he's filed a treasurer designation, and I think he's got a link on his website, and so he's in the race. But the race itself is a little bit unique because it's not a general election race, nor is it even a Democratic primary race. It's a race where the 125, 130 so precinct judges that are currently precinct judges in Precinct 1 get to decide. And it's an open vote that's held kind of caucus style, and they essentially pick. So right now, those 125 people are really, really important. This is a seat that opens up, I think, once in a generation, if you think of it from that perspective. So there's a lot of jockeying going on to see who can do it. And in the case of Senator Ellis, if he gets the appointment, that creates this cascading ripple effect down, because his office would then become vacant, and then there would be a new reappointment process. And if that person who fills it is also an office holder, so you can see it kind of going down the line. But it's hard. It's a partisan race. The 125, 130 people we're talking about are some of the most partisan Democrats that there will be. They're precinct judges. They're loyalists to the party. And so it becomes some of the traditional ways that you campaign, whether it's projects, are a little bit different in this context. I think that's one of the reasons why there's a bit of a challenge for Commissioner Locke in being successful, because as good as he's been as a commissioner thus far, sometimes that may be difficult to translate for him going forward.
So an interesting dynamic too is that we have State Senator Rodney Ellis, who is very well known in Houston and in Precinct 1 and would have a lot of name recognition, a lot of history. But then you also have Gene Locke, who is